Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Monday, the 8th of October, comes to you from London. We start by looking at the dollar index. Dollar just pushing a little bit higher again this morning. The one of the big stories is the Chinese yuan falling, with the authorities relaxing bank requirements there. So we are seeing that just strengthening the dollar a little bit. So dollar still looking quite strong. Euro looking a bit weaker against that stronger dollar, so that's quite key. Looking at the Japanese yen, we see here dollar strength just continuing on the medium term chart, but short term we just have turned a little bit bearish. Sterling looking a little bit more bearish this morning, just falling away against the dollar back to 130.70, but still looking above the cloud at the moment on the short-term chart. But medium and long-term, the picture is still quite bearish. Dollar strength dominating against the euro. Sterling has been very strong this last week, but this morning we're just seeing sterling falling away. Against the Swiss franc, a similar picture, and against the Aussie dollar, very similar picture as well. Bitcoin still struggling, just really in the doldrums at around the $6,500 level, still bearish in the medium and long term charts. US market had a pretty bad week last week. We see that from the weekly candle here. And we are bearish below the cloud on the short-term chart. The Nasdaq 100 also looking very bearish below the medium-term chart. We did find support right on the cloud on the daily chart, but at the moment we are short-term bearish, as we are for the Dow and the Russell index as well, where we're seeing now the medium-term chart coming under pressure. So that's quite bad for broad-based US stocks. The futures this morning, we're seeing the S&P future down 0.15%, the Nasdaq future down over 0.25%. So it does look like the US will open lower. The UK market lower again this morning, looking bearish on the medium and short-term chart and on the FTSE 250. So we're seeing that really stocks across the board are struggling. The DAX down this morning as well, and the CAC Quarante also bearish. So really seeing that we're having a pretty poor month for equities, and Japanese markets were down about 0.5%. Hang Seng down over 1%. Again, that Chinese bank story kicking in there, and the Chinese market, the local market in Shanghai, down 3.7%, so a really big fall there. Still holding on to a short-term bullish position, but really we're seeing this pressure of the longer and medium-term charts being bearish. The Indian market it was up very slightly, but still looking pretty bearish medium and short term. The Aussie market falling away quite significantly, down 1.4%. So stocks just falling across the board, really. Brent crude down 0.8% this morning, so looking bearish there now on the short-term chart, having reached that sort of high 80s area, and we are just seeing that pull back. And again, the shortage of targets to the upside does now mean that we may have well exhausted that run. The same with WTI. The story there is that the US may well allow some Iranian oil imports for some countries. And we're seeing the US nat gas price holding steady at $3.18. Gold is back below $1,200 this morning. That's turning it short-term bearish, and silver falling back as well. US Treasury yield sitting at 3.23%, so looking strong and holding that strength. We had a very strong week last week. We've jumped again this morning, so that's quite significant. That's not translating fully into European bond prices falling this morning, but they are looking bearish on all three time frames. Taking a look at the tech stocks, we saw really last week quite big moves there. Tesla, really interesting, down 7%, and we're seeing that really now coming back to test this 250 level. It's sitting at 260. A fall through 250 for Tesla would be quite bad. And if we look at the individual stocks on the Nasdaq, I'm taking using Yahoo data here. Looking at Friday, we saw there were a handful of stocks that were up, but most stocks were falling away, and the worst performer was in fact Tesla. Looking at Tesla's relative performance, it's underperformed the Nasdaq 100 by 30% this year, so it's really not looking very strong at all. And there were quite some significant fallers here, 5% on Costco. American Airlines still struggling there, down 3.9%. So again underperforming the market by some 40% this year. Taking a look at the actual some of the constituents, Apple was down 1.6%, still outperforming the market by nearly 15% this year on that relative chart, and holding its bullish position there. If we take a look at Amazon, we see here Amazon was down over 1%, but in fact looking pretty bullish, outperforming the market some 40% this year, so still looking pretty good. And if we get into some of the other stocks, Facebook fell back below the 160 level, so and underperforming the market some 25% this year, so really looking quite bearish there for Facebook with quite a lot of downside targets. So really key there as well. Taking a look at the FTSE this morning, if we go straight to the best performers, we've got so Bunzl up some 0.7%, Bats up some percent, Centrica up about 0.7%. We are seeing quite a few of the utilities here as well, so that's quite key. Schroders announcing a deal with Lloyds this morning, potentially. That's having a bit of an improvement there as well. And if we take a look to the worst performers this morning in the FTSE 100, IAG, the airlines group, British Airways, down some 2%, underperformed the Nasdaq by about 80% this year. Ocado also falling away quite significantly, have been falling quite a lot in the last several weeks, and it's not that clear when you look at it. EasyJet Airlines really struggling this morning. We're seeing that down just a 0.75%, and Tesco, which fell on Friday, falling further. That medium-term position is still bearish, underperforming the market some 10% this year so far. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.